The default assumption for many of these online Social Security calculators, financial planning tools, and even expert advice out there is to tell you to delay Social Security as long as possible. Well, that may not be the best strategy for you. In this episode, I'm going to break down 9 reasons why you may want to claim Social Security early. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining for another episode of the Planning for Retirement podcast. My name is Kevin Lau. I am your host. I'm also the owner of Imagine Financial Security. We help individuals over 50 that have at least $1 million maximize their retirement spending, minimize their lifetime tax bill, and worry less about the financial markets. If that is you want to make sure you follow this podcast and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We put out weekly content, retirement planning specific for folks in your demographic. And if you're interested in learning about working with us one-on-one, you can visit our website at www.imaginefinancialsecurity.com, or you could start with the Retirement Readiness Questionnaire that is linked in the description of this episode. We would love to learn more about you and see how we can help you in your retirement planning journey. Okay, before we dive into today's episode, I feel I need to address the markets for just a second. Because we work with clients on both sides of the political aisle, and we welcome this. And we try not to get political with our clients, so to speak, but unless it's a healthy discussion and it's a productive discussion. But I believe at the end of the day, we're all Americans and we should all be rooting for the well-being, safety, and security of our great country. However, with that being said, given the recent volatility, we have been experiencing a greater uptick in client inquiries about the markets. Okay, and people are concerned. So I just felt I need to address this topic before we jump into the actual topic. So first of all, why are the markets so volatile? I think it's very simple. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to tariffs. I even might add the threat of tariffs are spooking the markets. And essentially all of the Trump bump, essentially the markets rallied a little bit after Trump won the election, with the optimism of the administration's potential policies. But all of the Trump bump has been wiped out. Okay, so essentially the S&P 500 has been flat since November. And the reason this is happening is because tariffs could potentially be inflationary in the short term. And if inflation sticks around at above the Fed's target of 2%, I don't think they're going to be in a rush to cut interest rates anytime soon. And what has propped up the markets over the last 2 years? The potential rate cuts and their ultimate rate cuts. And then, of course, the investment into AI. So if the Fed doesn't feel compelled to cut rates, there goes the assumptions of the rate cuts that were baked into the rally that we've seen since 2022. Now, do I feel like we're going to enter a bear market or recession over it? I truly don't, but no one really knows. I don't have a crystal ball. And even Trump himself admitted to short term, there could be some inflation pain. He was quoted saying there will be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much, he said. But it's not like Trump and their administration want to destroy the economy. I mean, that's essentially against what they campaigned on in 2024. I think it's really the opposite. He campaigned on lowering prices. We saw record inflation really from 2020 through 2023. Okay, but it's very clear the administration's goal with tariffs is a few things. Number one is to stop illegal trafficking of drugs and criminals into our country's borders through Mexico and through Canada. Okay. He also wants to protect our national security by producing goods and services here in the U.S., manufacturing, things like pharmaceuticals, automobiles, semiconductor chips, very, very important, and ultimately reduce our trade deficits and attempt to balance our budget and reduce our debt that is sitting at $37 trillion at this point in time. Okay, and I ultimately believe the big push here is reviving the manufacturing industry here in the U.S., produce things here in the U.S. I think that is the big overarching goal with regards to tariffs. Okay, and that ultimately long-term could bring prices down. Although, like I said, I believe short-term, this is going to be sticky with inflation. And I talked about this on what to look for in the markets going into 2025 on that episode, as well as the Trump versus Harris policies back in November. I mentioned tariffs. I mentioned the cause to potential inflationary issues that we might have and ultimately the impact that might have on the Fed's rate cut decisions. From what I'm looking at this thing, yes, short term, we might have some volatility. People are spooked with the markets. People are afraid right now of investing. But ultimately, I'm kind of looking at things that are actually happening with regards to companies investing in the U.S. Here are a few things. Apple just announced plans to invest $500 billion over the next 4 years into the U.S. A new factory in Texas for AI servers. These could add upwards of 20,000 research and development jobs in the U.S. Listen to this one. This, in my opinion, is one of the biggest ones. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, just announced a $100 billion investment to build 5 additional chip manufacturing facilities in the US over the coming years. Okay, for those of you that don't know, TSMC produces around 90% of the world's most advanced chips, the ones like companies like NVIDIA use and other tech companies use to train their AI models and use in their technologies. Imagine if China invaded Taiwan. I mean, how would that fare for our national security and ultimately the race for AI dominance? I mean, do you want China leading the way with AI dominance? I don't. Okay. This is what we're talking about with national security. Eli Lilly and Company, here's another one, announced in February, it plans to more than double its U.S. manufacturing investment to $1.7 billion, creating at least 700 new jobs. Tesla announcing construction of a new mega factory near Houston, creating another 1,500 jobs. So I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible and just looking at the facts and the numbers that, hey, listen, if this is successful, okay, if ultimately U.S. manufacturing is revived, bringing inflation down, building things in the U.S., relying less on our global trade partners, and more importantly, less on countries that hate the United States like China and Russia and North Korea, it's going to take some time. But ultimately, if this works out, this could be one of the most important moments in American history that we've seen in a very, very long time. But short term, we're probably going to feel some volatility in the markets, okay? Personally, if it solves some of the issues that we mentioned earlier, like the border crisis and national security and building things in the U.S., bringing jobs in the U.S., forcing companies to stop shipping our jobs overseas, I'm kind of for this. And I'm sort of, even as a financial advisor, I'm like, hey, listen, I will take short-term volatility if we can solve this. But again, unfortunately, I do believe we're going to have to get used to some of this volatility for a while. And so I guess my plea here is just make sure your investment strategy is perfectly aligned with your retirement plans, your retirement income goals, your investment strategy, your tax strategy, your Roth conversion strategy, your estate plans, okay? And don't let the media dictate your investment decisions, okay? Because they're going to try to dictate, they're going to play off fear, they're going to play off your emotions, and do not make investment decisions based on your emotions, okay? Make sure you know where your retirement income is going to come from. Make sure you know how and when you're going to rebalance your portfolio, okay? Especially if we slip into a bear market or territory or worse, a recession. And if you want help with this, like I said, reach out. We'd love to hear about your situation and see if we can help you in a retirement planning journey, because we don't want you going this alone. At the end of the day, I do this podcast. I want to put out the content out there just so you get a feel for what we're talking to our clients about. And ultimately, our clients can get a sense of the strategies that we're putting in place, not only with them one-on-one, but also behind the scenes. Okay. But one of the levers that is really, really important to pull is during times of volatility is making sure you have some sources of guaranteed income. Okay. So making sure you can pull some of those levers. So where does guaranteed income coming from? Things like fixed income or bonds. Okay. That could also be coming from annuities. Okay. But for this topic, we're going to be talking about Social Security, which, by the way, is an annuity. Okay. So regardless of how you feel about annuities, Social Security is an annuity. And like I said, I've said this before, I've never had a client who has annuity income coming in to their picture in retirement. I've never had them call me up and say, Kevin, I wish I didn't have that annuity income. It's usually the opposite. It's usually in times of volatility, they're like, I wish I had some sort of fixed income or guaranteed income coming into the picture and not relying on my investment portfolio for 100% of the deal. Okay. But Social Security, arguably one of the most important decisions, if not the most important decision you're going to be making from a retirement planning perspective, is when to claim Social Security. So this episode is really a spinoff of last week's Whiteboard Retirement Plan when I talked about John and Jane. And ultimately, I did a YouTube video, a Whiteboard Fireside Chat, where I showed the different break-even points and ultimately how we came to that conclusion of claiming, John claiming at 62 and Jane had planned to claim at 70. So I figured, hey, why not? Why not do an episode where I actually talk about all the potential reasons not to delay, okay, and ultimately claiming early. I just want to clarify this. When I say claim early, I don't mean just claiming at 62. I think people think, their earliest retirement age for Social Security is 62. What I mean is any time before the age of 70, because ultimately your plan may be to delay until 70, which is your latest retirement age, because ultimately that's going to be your maximum possible benefit, which, like I've talked about before, this is usually the default advice for all the experts and pundits out there, and even the financial planning tools. But anything before 70, in this case, is going to be earlier. And ultimately, I guess another way to word it is, these are 9 reasons not to further delay Social Security. Okay. So again, doesn't mean always claiming it at 62. It could be anywhere between 62 and 69. Okay. And I said this on the Whiteboard Fireside Chat, and I'm going to say it once again here. It is literally impossible to select the quote unquote optimal Social Security strategy because it involves hindsight, years or even decades down the road, knowing exactly what happened with things like investment returns or inflation or your specific life expectancy or your spouse's life expectancy or taxes in the future. Okay. So it's literally impossible. So, but with that being said, what you can do is start with a really, really well thought out retirement income plan, including the 5 pillars of retirement planning: income and cash flow, investments, tax minimization, risk management, and legacy. And once you have this really, really well thought out retirement plan, you can just go ahead and make the best possible decision for your personal goals, your preferences, your financials, your peace of mind, and don't look back. All right, so why don't we jump into this? Let's start with a very, very simple, straightforward one is number one, your life expectancy. Okay. So this is really, like I mentioned, the default for a lot of these financial planning tools out there is they assume you have longevity on your side. You know, the default assumption that I see in pretty much every single financial planning calculator is age 90, sometimes age 95, sometimes even age 100. I've seen financial plans where prospective clients that became clients showed me their financial planning assumptions and it said 100. And I said, do you have like family members that lived until 100? They're like, no, I have no idea why they did that. And I have my reasons to believe or speculate. But ultimately, if you don't have longevity on your side, you know, maybe you have a pre-existing health condition. Maybe you have family history, or maybe you just had a recent diagnosis and you're like, I'm very unlikely to live past 70 or 75. Okay. It probably will benefit you from claiming Social Security as soon as possible, not further delaying Social Security. Okay. Because the crossover break even point of claiming at 70 versus claiming earlier, it typically will happen somewhere between 78 and 82 ish. That's typically what I've seen. So if you don't believe you're going to be making it that long, the earlier you claim, probably the more you're going to benefit because you're actually going to be collecting those payments as opposed to waiting until you're 70 years old to then make up the difference. The second thing I'll throw out there, which is also pretty straightforward, is you just simply need the cash flow. You know, you need the cash flow to cover your expenses. And you're just kind of like, I don't really know where else to pull my income from. I've got some investments in 401ks or TSPs or brokerage accounts. And you lack a plan and you have not consulted a professional. I probably would recommend you consult a professional if you lack a plan. But, you know, claiming early could just kind of be a lazy way just to create some guaranteed income and essentially creating a paycheck. Okay. And like I said, annuities can solve for this. Some people can actually use your own assets to buy an annuity to create that guaranteed income stream, but some people don't want to do that. So it doesn't align with their liquidity needs or personal preference or long-term financial goals or legacy goals. But again, claiming Social Security, that is an annuity stream. Okay. And taking it early, there's no harm in that if it aligns with the context of your overall financial plan, as long as it is a well thought out financial plan. But simply put, if you need the cash flow and you're just worried about just drawing a large dollar amount from your investment portfolio, that could potentially benefit you. Again, you got to crunch the numbers and you've got to make sure it aligns with your personal preferences. The third thing I'm going to throw out there is taking advantage of the start-stop strategy. Okay. So many of you may not be aware of this, but if you claim Social Security early, you can suspend your benefits. There's the option to suspend your benefits when you hit full retirement age. So that could range really anywhere from 66 up to 67. And then you can let your benefits take advantage of those delayed retirement credits, which is increasing your Social Security benefit by 8% annually until you hit 70. So you can take advantage of this. So maybe you're unexpectedly retired, okay, or unexpectedly unemployed. Maybe you got laid off. Maybe there were cuts by your employer. Maybe you work for the federal government. You're like, hey, I just took the deferred resignation program, or my division was cut. Now I'm unexpectedly retired. I don't know if I want to go back to work. I kind of want to test the waters a little bit and see how this retirement thing works. Maybe you start Social Security early and see how things play out. And maybe you go back to work at 65 or 66. Then you could suspend your benefits and stop your benefits and let them compound while you do go back to work, because that actually would help you from a tax standpoint potentially. Okay. But it almost sort of allows you to sample Social Security while still allowing you to secure those 8% delayed retirement credits later. Again, if you stopped those Social Security benefits at your full retirement age. Number 4, I'm going to throw out there is financial legacy is important to you. All right. So what do I mean by this? So this is exactly what I broke down in last week's YouTube video, the Whiteboard Fireside Chat last week, is that many of these online Social Security calculators and financial planning tools, they use this break-even analysis, which really has to do with your cumulative Social Security benefits. So, of course, if you live into your mid 80s or 90s, of course, the default assumption or recommendation is to delay until 70 because that's going to give you the maximum possible benefit from your Social Security income. Okay. But if financial legacy is important, you saw that on that Whiteboard Fireside Chat I did last week. There's not only the break-even point with cumulative Social Security, but there's also the trade-off of draining down your investment assets in those early years when you did not claim Social Security. So I'll give you an example on that one. Let's say you're 65 and you decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to delay it until 70 because I have longevity in my gene pool. I'm in good health. I plan to live until I'm 95. Yeah, okay. On the surface, probably makes sense for you to delay Social Security until 70. Okay. However, what if your rate of withdrawal in your portfolio is 8 or 9% a year? Okay. Now all of a sudden you're draining down your portfolio more aggressively compared to if you actually did start Social Security at, let's say, 65, maybe your rate of withdrawal is only 5% a year, or 4.5% a year. Your portfolio has a much better chance of actually preserving the balance and actually potentially growing in that 5-year period relative to if you had a rate of withdrawal 9, 10, or even excess of 10% a year. Okay. So you need to also sort of look at when the portfolio recovers, how long does it take to actually recoup what you lost by drawing down those investments in those early years? Okay. So again, this also has to do with a lot of assumptions. What's the rate of return on your investments? Are you retiring into good conditions or bad conditions? So don't just look at the cumulative Social Security benefits, also look at the break-even point of when your investments cross over down the road relative to or based on different claiming time horizons. Number 5, that brings the transitions very, very nicely into number 5, the market conditions are bad. So nobody has a crystal ball on this one, but imagine retiring in 2008, 2020, which I know ended the year pretty good, but didn't start very good, 2022, or even in today's economic environment, okay? On average, we go through a bear market every 4 years. And I think people forget a lot about this because from 2008 up until 2020, we didn't have a bear market. Okay. We just were in bull territory, partly probably because quantitative easing. We came out of the worst recession we've seen since the Great Depression. Quantitative easing, interest rates were at 0%. Of course, everyone's going to be making money and companies are going to be profitable with money that cheap. Okay. Now there's different arguments that, what that did to our debt ceiling and ultimately the deficits that we have, but that's neither here nor there. But what if things are volatile? Okay, like 2025, like we've kicked off the year with some volatility, you're losing sleep at night. Or let's say we actually enter into a bear market or recession and now your portfolio is down 20, 25, or even 30%. That might be a little uncomfortable to say, hey, I started the year drawing 5% from my portfolio, but now that the market's dipped 25 or 30%, now I'm actually drawing like 8% of my portfolio every single month. That might feel a little uncomfortable. Okay. So like I said, you could purchase an annuity to solve this, but if that's not an option for you, you could also begin taking Social Security during that period of volatility. Okay. And what's cool, like I mentioned about the start-stop scenario is, let's say you started Social Security during that period of volatility, and shout out to Roberto on this one. He's actually the one that hit this nail on the head. Maybe that volatility is short-lived, hopefully. Typically, bear markets last a little under 2 years. And, some of the worst recessions we've seen, it took about 5 years to recover from the low point up to the previous high. But maybe there's a period of time for 18 or 24 months that you're taking Social Security and you plan to stop it at full retirement age and allow your portfolio to recover at that point in time. Okay, so you could sort of parlay the bear market strategy with that start-stop strategy, again, if that is an option for you. But I think market conditions is a big one. And even though the math might tell you, hey, you know what? You still want to delay, stick to the plan, stay the course. I hate when people just say, stay the course, because at the end of the day, we're talking about folks that are retired. They're living on their life savings. And it's a lot easier for folks like me who are still working and accumulating savings and accumulating assets to tell someone, stay the course. Because at the end of the day, this is all they have. They don't want to go back to work. They don't want to be forced to go back to work. They don't want to be a burden on their family members. And so even though it may not be quote unquote optimal based on math, it might allow them to sleep well at night, knowing that they have that income coming in from Social Security now as opposed to delaying. And ultimately, that again will allow that investment portfolio to weather the storm a little bit better. Our number 6, you're not concerned about spousal benefits. All right. So, what do I mean by this? So, in general, it's sort of like an understanding or a good rule of thumb if you've got a married couple or if there's a spousal benefit option to try to delay the larger of the two benefits. Okay. And especially if longevity is a concern, because why is that the case? Well, if let's say spouse A has the larger benefit than spouse B. Well, if spouse A passes away, spouse B is going to take spouse A's benefit and they're just going to step up to their benefit. Whereas if spouse B passes away, spouse A will just continue on with their benefit. So there is a loss of Social Security income in the event or when one of these spouses passes away. So by delaying Social Security with the larger benefit, let's say in that example until age 70, you have the maximum possible survivor benefit locked in to the family. Okay. But what if your benefit is the lower of the two benefits? So maybe your benefit, it's the smaller one. Maybe your spouse B, well, maybe you go ahead and just claim it a little bit earlier than 70. That way you get that income coming into the picture and potentially for other reasons, preserving your portfolio for legacy or other reasons, and ultimately trying to delay that spousal benefit. Or maybe you're single and you're not even concerned about this anyways. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to take my Social Security because, no one else is depending on my Social Security benefit. So that could also be a reason to not waiting until 70. Number 7 is very hypothetical in this one, but I think this is a legitimate concern for many people that I talk to, is hedging your bets against future cuts to Social Security. Okay. Now, there's been a lot of stories written about this in the media. We've talked about this a little bit on our podcast too, but in general, okay, let me explain how this works. Social Security benefits it's not like there's some sort of big account that is making money that is used to then spin off income to the Social Security benefits income. Social Security benefits are funded for the most part by payroll taxes. So employees pay payroll taxes, employers pay payroll taxes. Okay. And up until, let's say, around the last decade, prior to that, 100% of the benefits for Social Security benefits were being funded by payroll taxes. So things were fine. But what happened was older baby boomers started to retire. They started to live longer. And all of a sudden, there was a deficit. And prior to that, we had a surplus. So the surplus was used to actually put inside of a trust account. This was the Social Security trust account. And so the trust account was then used to shore up those deficits that we've experienced over the last decade because there are more and more baby boomers retiring, they're living longer, and payroll taxes have not been keeping up with those increased Social Security benefits. Okay. So what you'll hear a lot is Social Security is going bankrupt in 2034. That's sort of the headline, the catchy news clip that you see or read about. But what that means is the trust fund portion, the one that's been shoring up the gap, that will be depleted by 2034 if nothing changes. Okay. And we'll talk about what some potential changes there could be. But right now, as it stands, about 80% of the projected benefits would be covered by payroll taxes in 2034. So once the trust fund is depleted, there's no sure up, there's no true up because the trust fund is gone. But obviously people are hopefully still working in this country and paying into the system. And there's, assuming nothing changed with the tax rates, okay, then 80% of the benefits will be funded by payroll taxes. So you might just be thinking, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead and claim my benefit because I think Social Security is done. I think it's going to be means tested, or I think our politicians are going to screw it up. I just want to get mine now while I know it's there. I know for sure what my benefit's going to be. And if something changes in the future, that's their problem. Okay. Or that's our problem, I should say. Now, is that logical? Potentially. I don't want to tell you how to think and know what to believe. And again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with payroll taxes and things of that nature. I think there's a very high likelihood that this issue is going to be solved. I don't think anyone is going to vote for an administration as we approach 2034 that's not going to solve this issue because retirees are now depending on Social Security income in excess of 50% of their cash flow needs. So we need to figure out a way to shore up the gap here. So what do I think is very likely to happen? What's my prediction on this one? Let me get out my crystal ball. I believe that they're going to just simply increase the Social Security wage base. So what that means is the payroll taxes, which is split between the employee and the employer, it's 6.2% paid by the employee, 6.2% paid by the employer. But that amount is capped out. So once you make over that amount, I think it's somewhere in like the $170,000 range in 2025. So once you make over 170,000, you don't pay more in taxes into Social Security. So if you make over that amount, you probably notice you get a little bit of a bump in your net cash flow because you've maxed out your Social Security payments in. So it's kind of actually, it almost kind of hurts the lower income people and actually benefits the higher income people, which is interesting. So I think if anyone's going to really solve this, I really do believe they're going to just simply increase the wage base and say, you know what, instead of it being capped at 170, I think it's 176, but instead of being capped at 176, we're going to cap it at 200 or 250, or maybe there's no cap. Maybe regardless of your income, you pay into Social Security. And I do believe that's going to true up a lot of this shortfall. But they could also raise the tax rate. I mean, they could certainly push the tax rate up from 6.2 upwards. Maybe it's 7 or 7.5% for both the employer and the employer. But that's going to be an issue that is going to be front and center for politicians over the next decade. And whatever the fix is, I don't know if this is the reason I would claim Social Security earlier, but I want to throw it out there because I do believe a lot of people think like this and are very concerned about the future of Social Security and its solvency. So I'm not going to tell you how to think. Okay. All right. Number 8 is a good one. This is a fun one. You want to go ahead and take the payments. So maybe you don't even need Social Security. So maybe your income is hunky dory. Maybe you've got a pension. Maybe you're taking distributions from your investments. You're like, hey, this is more than what I need. I don't need to take Social Security, so I'm going to delay it. Or you could go ahead and start Social Security and you could take those payments and put them into your own investment account. You can invest those dollars for yourself, create liquidity. Okay. And if you have a very aggressive investment strategy and you're savvy with your investments, the argument there could be you can build up a higher war chest than otherwise you could have by delaying those Social Security benefits. So essentially you say, yeah, give me my money now. I'm going to take that money and use it to my advantage, the time value of money and opportunity cost to invest it in myself. Maybe it's the S&P 500 or diversified portfolio of equities, or maybe it's real estate, or maybe you have a private investment or business that you feel like can earn a higher rate of return than Social Security provide. I think that could be a really unique case where claiming benefits early could potentially pay off. Now, there's no guarantee there. Now, of course, there's no guarantee. You must have a fairly aggressive risk appetite. You need to be comfortable with some volatility there, but it could absolutely pay off in the long term. And you could build up this liquidity in this non-qualified bucket, because at the end of the day, if you were to pass away, obviously there's the spousal benefit, the survivor benefit, but your kids are not going to get your Social Security payments. I mean, that money is gone. Whereas if you took those Social Security payments and invested those into your own side fund, that could be used to fund your future retirement goals. That could be used to self-fund long-term care, or that could be used to pass on as a financial legacy. Like I mentioned earlier, legacy is important to you. Okay. So really, really interesting one. And I've had some conversations with a lot of people about this. And I think this really gets people kind of, the wheels turning a little bit, especially if they're savvy when it comes to an investment perspective. And it kind of also goes hand in hand with number 7, your future. You're worried about the future of the solvency. So why not get your payments now and get those invested in your own balance sheet? Because that's actually an asset on your balance sheet, not a future cash flow or a future income source. All right, and last but not least, number 9 is unlocking special benefits for spouses or dependents. So this one is pretty cool. There are a lot of different factors within this topic. So I don't want to, and there are a lot of special details in some of these too. So I don't want to get too into the weeds on this one. But in general, if let's say you have a spouse that has much lower earnings, so you're the higher of the two benefits, okay? Well, your spouse is most likely, or maybe your spouse has no credits, okay? No Social Security credits. They were stay-at-home spouse for their lifetime, and maybe they have no Social Security benefit of their own. Well, the only way they can get the spousal benefit is by you claiming Social Security. Okay, now obviously if you claim early and they claim early, the benefit would be reduced. But ultimately, by you claiming and starting Social Security benefits, that does unlock a spousal benefit. So that is important. And your spouse wants to go ahead and start their spousal benefit. They can't do that until you actually claim your own Social Security benefit. Okay. But in some cases, this is a lot more common these days, especially, remarriages and having children later in life. Maybe you are eligible for Social Security, but you also have dependent children that are under the age of 18, or they're still in high school. There's some special rules around that. Your children, your dependent children, are also eligible for a Social Security benefit. And it amounts to up to 50% of your primary insurance amount, which is the amount you would receive at your full retirement age. Okay, so your spouse could get Social Security, your children could get Social Security, or your spouse could get Social Security if they're caring for dependent children. Your dependent children could get Social Security, but they can't get those benefits until you start claiming your own benefit. Now, again, there are some drawbacks. If you claim before your full retirement age, you're going to potentially permanently reduce your own Social Security benefit, but that could sort of contribute to increased cash flow when you may need it. Maybe you're sending your kids to college in a few years and like, hey, I haven't done anything with college savings, or hey, we're paying for private school in high school and it's costing us a lot of money. Maybe it makes sense for you to unlock some of those dependent or spousal benefits prior to you turning 70. And there's many examples that I've seen where that's come about. So again, unlocking some of those more nuanced dependent or spousal benefits could also be a reason to claim a little early than you initially anticipated. All right, so that was a lot, guys and gals. So I appreciate all of you tuning in. I hope you guys found it helpful. And I just want to reiterate the importance of coordinating your Social Security strategy with the context of your overall financial plan. Like, don't look at claiming Social Security in a silo or in a vacuum. If you did it in a silo, you would just simply say, okay, what's my life expectancy? And how much or what do I need to do to get my maximum amount of benefit? So if you have longevity, it might be waiting until 68, 69, or 70. If you don't have longevity, it might be claiming early. But there also are other factors involved here. Your personal financial goals, your risk tolerance. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is there are other qualitative factors and quantitative factors that are going to drive your personal Social Security decision. But once you have a well thought out retirement income plan, once you have a well thought out investment strategy, pick your Social Security plan that aligns with your situation, that aligns with your plan. Okay, and just be confident you made the right choice. Like once you've gone through the process and you've said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I plan to do. Feel confident that you made the right choice, because you're going to hear a lot of pundits and experts and even friends or neighbors that are talking about what they did or what they plan to do. That's not you. Their situation is probably totally different than your situation. Okay, so make sure align your Social Security plan with your own plan. And of course, if you want to help with this, we'd love to help with that. I mean, this is why we do what we do. We get super excited helping people plan for retirement. So again, visit our website, fill out the retirement readiness questionnaire if you're interested in that. But that's it for today. And listen, if you found this helpful, if you found this episode valuable, of course, make sure to give us that 5-star review. We need to pump up our reviews a little bit on Spotify and Apple. So I'm going to ask all of you, well, our listener count has gone up drastically, but the 5-star reviews kind of, not really keeping pace. So again, if you've been listening for a while now, or if you're new to the show, but you're finding value in the content, give us that 5-star review. And also, like I said, subscribe to our YouTube channel there as well, if you're in the YouTube realm, because we not only post these podcasts on Tuesdays, but we also do the side chats or whiteboard fireside chats on Thursdays as well, where I go a little deeper into a specific topic. And then last but not least, what I'd say is just go ahead and share this podcast with someone else you care about who's also what I like to call the PFR Nation caliber, the Planning for Retirement Nation caliber. So these are also individuals that are over 50 that have done well saving and investing to this point in time. And I guarantee you they will also find value in the content we're putting out. We're trying to cut through all the noise that the media throws out there, and we're going to talk about things that are relevant to you, our specific audience, and your financial planning situation. So if you know anyone who fits that bill, just make sure to share this episode or this podcast with them, because I do believe they'll also thank you for that and find value. But as always, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and we'll see you next week.